Díomh Accordia agus fáilte arás. Hello friends and welcome back to the Grá Mòr Léan podcast. It's Misha Léan Nigul. I am Elaine Doyle and it is with deep, heartfelt gratitude that I welcome you back to this sacred space. Hello everyone, how are you getting on? I hope everyone is keeping well on this winter night. I am back again. This is the second podcast episode in a week. I'm like, who it is? Who is this? But it is, I'm really excited to be back here with you, sharing the musings of my heart. And deeply realising that through sharing what's going on in my life or reflecting my inner reflections, it actually really helps me to come back into a place of truth and love and peace. And I think that's the case for many of us. A lot of the time the medicine that we give to others is the medicine we need firstly. So I am deeply guided to share more on relationships and truth. So today's episode is going to be divine truth versus distorted truth. Really excited to speak more into this topic. But before we get into all that, just landing here in this moment. So right now it is the 24th of January 2024. And we are still in the midst of that winter darkness. That time of slowing down, reflecting and deeply nurturing ourselves. So just coming home to that season that we are still in, and we are on the approach to Imbolg, Láil le Bríd, St. Bridget's Day next week, which is hard to believe that February is nearly upon us. And Imbolg meaning in the belly, so it represents the first seeding of new life in the belly. The gestation period, the pregnancy is underway. And it also represents the time of the lambs being born, the spring, new life. So just preparing over the next week, or reflecting on what are we rebirthing ourselves into this year? What seeds are we planting? Or what seeds are we nourishing? I mean, I feel like the darkness and the inner work of the winter has prepared us now to actually see what is growing within us. What are we pregnant with? What creations are we bringing through? And I was actually talking with my own therapist last night about everything that I've been moving through since Samhain, and how so many veils have been lifted in my life that, next week around this time of Imbolc, I am now really rebirthing myself into massive alignment and truth and love. So seeing whatever we've shed during the winter, whatever we've said goodbye to, like the trees so effortlessly allowing the leaves to fall away, whatever we have let fall away like the leaves on the tree, helps us to create and birth more truth and alignment. So it's a beautiful time of the year to really see what are we birthing and creating this year. And just taking a deep breath here. And again, taking that journey from our head down into our hearts. Down into our wombs, or our pelvic floor, or our sacral chakra. And feeling our rootedness in the earth beneath us. Like the trees, we need to deeply grow our roots and connect our roots down into the mother beneath us. So in this space now, just allowing yourselves to come home to your body, your heart, and your rooted connection to the land beneath you. And just opening your heart and mind to receiving that which your soul wants to receive here. And just allowing yourself to be present. And in this moment with me together. Yeah. So yes, now that we are all closer to our hearts and present, let's get stuck in. As I sip on some cup of tea. So yes, this topic, speaking truth, or divine truth versus distorted truth, is linked to the last 2 podcast episodes that were called Trauma Bonds, Karmic Relationships and Mirror Work. So if you haven't listened to those 2 episodes, I would recommend listening to them, because this episode will make more sense. However, I know for some of us time is limited, so just trusting that if you're just here for this one, that's okay too. And just to say to people again, because I'm still getting beautiful messages about it, the first part of Trauma Bonds and Karmic Relationship gets cut off, but it's finished in part 2 in the next episode. So yes, truth. Firanna in Irish. Firanna, such a beautiful word, Firanna. I said name because I know a beautiful woman, Lauren, named her child Firanna, and I thought, wow, what a beautiful name to put on a child, Firanna. Anyways, yes, I've been really reflecting about truth since I recorded those episodes last week about trauma bonds, karmic relationships and mirror work. And I really wanted to elaborate more on this topic. Because, as I said, when we're speaking into relationships, karma, trauma, mirror work, there's many, many, many different threads to it. And it's really important for me to elaborate on some of those topics that arose, because sometimes when we just briefly speak into it, it's not given the full picture of how we navigate these certain topics or scenarios in relationships. And for me, speaking through is one of those topics where it's not such a clear topic, or not topic, it's not a clear topic or subject. There's not one way of doing it. And there's not one right way of doing it. There's many different scenarios where speaking our truth has to be done in different ways. And I know I mentioned it. I feel like I mentioned speaking truth under the topic of how to be in conscious relationship, right? So for me, and again, these musings are based on my current state of consciousness, which is constantly evolving and changing. And take what you want and leave the rest. This is my truth based on my current experiences, or past experiences. Some of it might resonate, some of it might not. You know, this isn't the gospel according to Elaine Doyle. It is just what's in my heart. That's all I can share. It's just important for me to say that as well. Sometimes I read books and they're stating things as fact. I'm like, I think it can be, a dangerous thing to do sometimes, because everybody's truth and fact varies according to so many different variables. So this is I won't even say truth, musings. So like when we look at the word truth, I think what I've realised is there isn't one necessarily universal truth when it comes to a certain topic. You know, if the last few years taught me anything, it's that there is many different truths. And to be in truth, which is the same vibration as love, we must honour all people's truths. And we must not separate ourselves just because we have different truths. You know, let's take the pandemic, for example. You know, for some people what was shared on the news was truth. For other people, it wasn't truth. You know, when it came to medical decisions with vaccinations, one person's truth was certainly not someone else's truth. And I think what was happening in the world was one person's truth was seen as fact, and anyone who wasn't going along with that truth was demonized and segregated from society. And I remember thinking, why are we all separating here through differences in truth? Like, our job here is to surely find unity and what connects us rather than what separates us. And you know, that is the same in relationship. It's not always that everything in our relationship we agree on, but how we communicate that. So for me, I suppose the one universal truth that I think is real is love. Like, as in, truth is love. So if your truth is not coming from a loving place, then I suppose this is what this episode is about. Is that divine truth, or is it distorted truth if it's not coming from a loving place? So I'm going to explain that again with an example. Okay, so firstly, before I use the example, so to be in conscious relationship is to speak true, is to communicate clearly our needs, and when our needs aren't been met and when our boundaries have been crossed, etc., etc. Everybody, well, I suppose a lot of people on the healing path are talking about truth, speaking truth, to be in truth. It's a hot topic right now, which is great, because for eons we have, as a race, not been in truth. We've not been living in our hearts. We've not been living in truth as a race. You know, completely going against what our heart wants, brushing everything under the carpet, living a life that our family wants us to live, our society wants us to live in, which isn't truth to our soul and to our hearts. So this age of Aquarius, or this new earth, or this age of the heart, whatever you want to call it, is all about coming back to the heart. And within the heart, we will find our unique truth of how we want to express ourselves in the world. So, yeah, it's really out there. But for me, what I want to get across in this episode is the difference between sharing divine truth versus sharing distorted truth. For example, okay, let me think of an example. I had one there now, but let me see. Okay. I'm just going to use an example that I would have experienced growing up in my family or my society, okay? So you've put on a couple of pounds, you've put on weight, let's say, and your family is pointing that out to you. Oh my God, Elaine, you've really put on a lot of weight. So that is the truth, right? I've put on weight, right? And maybe the person in my life who's telling me that is doing it for my own good because they're worried about my health. And they're like, I need to tell Elaine the truth. This is truth now. I'm going to tell her that she's put on weight. And to me, that's not... Sometimes, I was reflecting on this today. Sometimes that can be helpful if it's done in a really loving way. And sometimes it can actually also help us. Where am I not loving myself or seeing myself? And I don't mean by being overweight, but by constantly pointing out my own flaws, but I'm overweight and I'm this, that or the other. So sometimes those reflections can make us do deeper inner work. But I do feel if there is constant pointing out of people's flaws, that is distorted truth. And it isn't coming from a place of love. And it's actually bordering on abusive. And labeling it under truth. Oh, well, that's the truth. Does that make sense to people? That's when speaking truth is absolutely bullshit. Because it's a projection of wounds, really. That we're meant to look a certain way, we're to be a certain way. And if it's a constant thing where you're pointing out, oh, you're overweight, you're too skinny, you're not doing this right, did you do that right? It is not love. And truth and love to me is the same vibration. Okay, so I have many examples in my personal life of this. From my own side, where it is like I'm really passionate, and I talked about this in the last episode, about utilising conscious relationships to share truth and to share, what's coming up for us and our triggers in relationships. But for me, I have to be very careful. Is this divine truth? Or is this distorted truth where I'm going to be projecting loads of shite onto this person? Like, is this really coming from a loving place? So I had a scenario happen before Christmas where something came up in one of my relationships, and I was like, the person had done something, and I was like, oh, I really need to share my truth with this person because what they've done is completely not in alignment with my views or my values. And I kept thinking about it, and I was like, will I share my truth with this person? I need to share my truth when everyone's talking about truth, and I'm talking about truth. And when I sat and connected with my oversoul and my higher self and my guides, Spirit was like, you're in your shadow here, and you need to sort this shit. You need to sort this out yourself. This isn't about projecting that onto this person, because this is actually, this trigger you're feeling is actually your own shadow, if that makes sense. So it's like calling someone out because they've put on weight. It's like, that's your own stuff. That's nothing got to do with them. I'm just wondering if I can explain it even deeper. Yeah, sometimes we're going to get triggered in a relationship like that, and it isn't always necessarily sharing our truth if our truth really is coming from a shadowy, distorted place like it was there. And all I can say to people is, if you connect with your soul, you'll know whether it's divine truth or distorted truth. I knew the fact that I hadn't shared this truth with this person already was a sign that was probably my own shite. And, you know, sometimes that will spill out where we will end up sharing truth, and I put in commas, with someone that is our own shite, and they'll be able to hold it and reflect it back to us. Look, I actually think this is your own stuff. But sometimes if we continuously do that, share distorted truth in our relationships. I'm just letting my little cat in. Come in, Salem. Salem meaning peace. It can actually affect our relationship if we continuously share that distorted truth. It can really affect our relationship. For example, like if you're continuously telling someone, and this is a really simple example, you've put on weight, you've lost weight. Like if someone is saying that to you every day, that's going to affect your relationship, I feel. So if we're constantly pointing things out, or nitpicking, it can really affect the relationship. And I've noticed that, you know, especially in my romantic relationship, pointing out all the things that the person isn't doing right, that's really not always coming from love. You know, we're projecting our own ideas and ideals about how somebody should be. And really it's about that remembrance that we are all perfect within our imperfections. So I suppose what I'm saying is, when we're speaking truth, I feel it's very important to take a breath, journal, whatever you do to connect to your higher self and your soul, to make sure this is in the highest good of both of us and all of us for me to share this. And an example of that was something I shared in the last episode, where I actually wrote a letter to someone very dear to me in my life, where I needed to speak into the distortions in our relationship. And this wasn't about, you know, nitpicking or anything like that. This was like, there's a lot of unloving things happening in our connection, and I need to share with you my boundaries within what's happening in our connection. And I took some time to reflect on what I would write, and stating that boundary in that letter with that person has completely transformed our relationship, completely, to a more loving place, where there is a lot more loving communication now. And that was in that person's highest good as well, because they don't want to be slipping into their shadow and being unloving and unkind and abusive in their words. They don't, of course. So when we speak our truth, that is divine truth, it is in the highest good of all. It's in the highest good of all. Just taking a breath there. And yes, apologies if I'm repeating myself at different points in this episode, but it's not such an easy thing for me to describe, so I might need to go over it just to make sure I'm getting the message across. So I feel like, for me, divine truth, as I said, is coming from this love and place of, this is in the highest good for us all. This is because I love me, I love them, and I love our connection, and I want to bring it into more harmony. To me, distorted truth feels like it's coming from a place of judgment. There's a deep, not even discernment. I feel like truth is discernment, or divine truth is discernment, but distorted truth is when it's really judgy. A lot of judgment, nitpicking, and coming from a really triggered place. So like a reactive space rather than a responsive space, like sharing divine truth. And when I say coming from a triggered place, there's a lot of layers to that, which is like, if somebody has done something and it triggers you, what triggers mean, a trigger means is that scenario, that thing that they've done has brought you back to a time when something really traumatic happened, right? And that whatever they've done has reminded you of that traumatic event or that trauma. And a really simple example of that is, if an army veteran hears an explosion, they can be brought back to the time where they were in war, and they can become very triggered and very upset and withdraw. A more everyday example is, if somebody doesn't respond to me on WhatsApp, right, doesn't get back to me, it can trigger my abandonment wound with my mother or my father. Or the deeper thing is, it actually is triggering your separation wound from Mother Earth or from the divine. It's not about them not replying to you, because, people are allowed to have boundaries with their phone. It's not about what their action is. It's about the actual underlying thing. What are they triggering for me? And I see that a lot, where people are like, and when you did this, it made me feel like this. But actually, it wasn't really about that event, was it? It's about the bigger trauma that happened to you when you were younger, or whenever, another time in your life. So when we become really triggered by something someone says or does, it's really important to reflect on, what core wound is this bringing up for me before I go and speak to that person, or else I'm going to project all of my shit onto that person. So I feel like the distorted truth can a lot of the time come from this very triggered place where the person has brought us back into a really difficult time or trauma. And as I said, it's very judgmental and nitpicking. And we're labeling it as, I'm sharing this because, it's in their best interest that they know that they're doing this wrong, or they're eating the wrong food, or they're overweight. But a lot of the time, that's not actually why we're doing it. We're doing it because of our own judgments and projections of how people should be. And yeah, I feel like that's really important, is to notice, especially as healers, when we want to fix and heal everybody. Am I actually doing that for the right reasons? And is it up to me to even share that with them? Is that up to me? Especially if someone is very much on the path. If someone has, I'm just using putting on weight as an example because it's an easy one to use, but like, they know that. And they don't need other people telling them that they've put on weight or they're doing X, Y, and Z wrong. We don't need usually people are their worst critics anyway, without us putting more criticism on top of their inner criticism. And that's their journey with it. Who are we to say what's right or wrong? A lot of us are playing God, and that's not our job or our role. Yeah. I really feel our role as fellow humans is to learn to love each other unconditionally, because we all have flaws. And a lot of the time when we're nitpicking other people's flaws is because we're not really acceptance of our own flaws or humanness. And I'm sharing this from a place of being at the receivership of distorted truth and also sharing a lot of distorted truth. You know, it's not one way, it's been both ways for me. And I noticed it a lot in my relationship with my partner, where because I've done, or, you know, we're both on the healing path. And I've done a lot of healing on my inner world, that I'm like, at times was really projecting, this is how it should be done, and this is how you should do it. And it led to so much disharmony in our relationship, like so much disharmony. And thank Goddess I awoke from that judgment of sharing such distorted truth with my partner, which would have severed their connection completely, and came back into a place of, to say you love somebody is to love them unconditionally. And you're not expecting them to be further ahead on the path, or to be a better version of themselves, or to be doing things like you think they should be doing. That is the fucking ego. And your ego needs to take a seat. I believe if you really want to be in divine union, if you really want to be in sacred relationship and friendships and sisterhood, we need our ego to take a seat. We need to stop judging each other and nitpicking and thinking that our way is right and the other person's is wrong. And my truth is more valid than their truth. It will sever love in the relationship. Yes, many threads to this topic. Another aspect that I wanted to say as well, and I know I touched on it already, is it also can be really helpful to share that distorted truth, to say it out loud to somebody else so it dissipates. You know, I've had this where I've done that, and then when I'm saying it to someone, I'm like, sorry, this is really my own shit and really distorted, but I'm really glad I have had this opportunity to know that by sharing it. So yeah, it's not that sharing distorted truth is a bad thing either, if that makes sense. And luckily I have some loads of amazing people in my life who have been able to sit there and hear my distorted truth and not take it personally and not get triggered, and just hold that space of unconditional love. Because deep healing happens in that space too, where we allow untruths or distortion some airtime as well. So I hope that doesn't sound like I'm contradicting myself, but that is what I've noticed to work as well, is the sharing of both divine truth and distorted truth. And I've noticed in my relationship with partners and friends that it's a really beautiful thing to hold that really loving space for somebody as they share their truth, whether distorted or divine, because you're acting as a mirror for them to allow them to see what actually isn't real love and divine truth. So I've been in that scenario, and I think it's in only the last couple of months that I've actually been able to do that, because I've come more into love with myself and the divine. I think before now I would have been way too triggered, because I would have took it personally, and I would have known this isn't actually about me though. This is your own shit. But like, that's not the kind of thing that person wants to hear in that moment. They just want to be heard. They need this to have some airtime. So I'm really, really happy that I'm now in a space where I can actually just come into a place of unconditional love and spaciousness to hear someone's truth, no matter whether it's divine or distorted or whatever. Because it can really, as I said, mirror back stuff for the other person and also help the relationship come into more harmony and deeper peace. Taking another pause there. Yes, there are many things to reflect on for me in relation to this topic. And something else that just came to me there was, if somebody is sharing their truth with you and you feel in your body it's coming from a distorted place, the possibility is that them sharing their distorted truth with you is mirroring your own distorted truth within you, if that makes sense. So in the last 2 episodes, we talked about mirror work and how everybody in your life is mirroring your own consciousness or your own gifts and wounds. So if people are sharing distorted truth with you, it is an opportunity for you to harmonize and neutralize whatever that distortion is. So for example, if someone every day is telling you that you're overweight or you look terrible, perhaps they're reflecting back to you the harshness of how you speak to yourself. Okay? I know I got a lot of that growing up, and now that I'm in a place of deep love for myself, I no longer get those sort of comments from anybody. But I have noticed like I can be very hard on myself in other areas of my life, which I am now trying to harmonize and neutralize through love. But I have had people kind of comment on those things, and that all they were doing was reflecting back to me my own lack of self-love or harshness. So even when we're talking about truth, it's important for us to come back to that place of mirror work. And also, you know, I'm reminded as I say that just because somebody might be mirroring back to you own part of your own consciousness, that doesn't mean that it's healthy for you to be around that person all the time. Sometimes we need to cut the cords and take space to neutralize that which they are reflecting back to you. And I remember, you know, this when I was first on the path and I was around a lot of people who were mirroring back really judgmental, unloving parts of myself. And how it wouldn't... I lost my thought there. How... I lost it again. Yeah, how I realised that I needed to take space from those people because they were reflecting back to me a consciousness that I was trying to rapidly change and move away from. And if I was to continue to stay around them, I never would have got to where I am now, which is a higher, well, not, I don't want to say higher, but like more loving. So sometimes, it can be helpful to have a constant mirror to make sure that mirror work is done. But sometimes it's really important to actually move away from it. So that's really important to say as well. Yes. And there now, I was just reminded again of that experience I had before Christmas where I was going to share my truth with somebody and didn't. And one of the reasons I probably wasn't able to do it was because that person's consciousness is very high. So my truth wasn't reflective of their consciousness. So it was impossible for me to actually share that truth with that person. Thank God, because I really would have regretted that. It was completely projection and coming from a very judgmental place. So, if we're in a space where there is a judgmental, wounded truth being shared, it's because a part of that person you're sharing with consciousness is being mirrored back to them. So trusting that it's all divine and it is as it's meant to be. But for me, it's now 2024. We are deep in the new earth now. For a lot of us, this new state of consciousness, this awakening happened over the past, since, I suppose, for some people since 2020, but for a lot of people, 2018, 2019, 2020, 21, 22 people, we really have started to devote ourselves deeper to this path. So for me, it's now 2024, so it's like, okay, gotta step up, Elaine, step the fuck up, do the work. Can't be continuously projecting distorted truth onto those that I love. It's just not an option anymore to be projecting and pointing fingers. And I actually reached out to a sister of mine recently, and I just apologized for how I shared my truth sometimes, because now I can see it was actually coming from a distorted, judgmental, projected, triggered place. And it was really beautiful to be able to just apologize for that, because now it's clear. And it's funny because back at the time, that was my truth and I was doing the right thing. And in a way, I can see on reflection that yes, space was actually needed in my connection with that person, but it could have been done in a way more loving way, that I wasn't projecting all my shit onto somebody and being judgmental. And it reminds me of something else I was reflecting on this past week. And this is probably a whole podcast episode in itself. But if our needs weren't met growing up by our caregivers, whoever they were, whether they were our birth parents or not, if our needs weren't met, and if there is child abuse or trauma there, right, we can spend our whole life expecting our friends to meet those needs, right, and to love those parts of ourselves. And if they don't meet those needs, we can then project and judge and nitpick at them for not meeting our needs, for not being the parents to us. And that's very unconscious, and I see it all the time, and I've seen it in myself for many years, that my wounded inner child hadn't been tended to fully, because if there's childhood trauma of any kind or neglect, and the reality is a lot of us are going to have woundings from our childhood, because our parents' generation weren't fully in our hearts or connected to their soul, which leaves us with woundings. And even my children are going to have woundings, because I'm not ascended yet, so I'm still in my humanness, right? So let me just come back. So we have these woundings, right? And we haven't reparented ourselves. So when we haven't received those needs or that love growing up, as adults, we reparent our inner child through so many different modalities: love, counselling, therapy, ancestral healing, all these different things, yoga, all these different things to heal our inner child. But if we don't do that sufficiently, unconsciously we can expect our friends or our soul tribe to meet those needs of our wounded child. And we're projecting and judging them then when they don't. Oh, you you don't show up enough, or you don't text me back enough, or send me voice notes, or it's not balanced relationship. But like, that's not necessarily their role in your life or their responsibility. And of course, we live in an interdependent world where within friendships and romantic relationships and marriages, it's okay and necessary to have expectations or to be able to rely on your partner. But I really feel strongly that it's not up to anybody else other than yourself to heal your own wounds and your inner child and your trauma. It's an absolutely unrealistic expectation to put on anybody else in your life. And I've had a massive awakening about this recently, because I realised that I was disempowering myself a lot by over relying on my friends and community and partner to support me emotionally, when actually I'm well able to do it myself. Like, I'm well able to hold myself. And I'm not saying there isn't times where I could have done it. Like, I didn't deeply need other people. Like, there's certain initiations I really don't know how I would have got through without my community and my tribe. So I'm not saying that that's not healthy either, but overall, I feel like for me it's very important that there is a stable, solid relationship with my own soul, my own heart, so I actually can carry myself through many initiations. Because even as I said that, I know I actually would have got through these things. What I have noticed in my relationship with my partner is it's just so much nicer sometimes to can't believe I'm saying that. Oh my God. It is, to share these difficult experiences with someone else. That's why I became a therapist, for God's sake. And that's why I go to my therapist every week. However, there is also a solid trust in myself as well, to hold myself through these initiations. And that's very empowering. So when we have that solid, empowering relationship with ourselves, we're not over relying on other people. And I noticed that in my romantic relationship is like, it's even in a union, whether it's romantic or friendship, that person has also got their own healing work to do. If we're over reliant on them, we're pulling them out of their own healing path sometimes as well, if that makes sense. Like, all of us are moving through so much right now that I think we need to be able to hold ourselves on a day-to-day basis, because everyone else is moving through so much as well, that it's not always healthy to be pulling each other through it all. Yeah, and I'm just like, how is that related to truth? Well, it is, because it's like, that's when we're not self-sourcing love from ourselves and we're over-reliant on friends or whatever, then our truth can become distorted, which is like, you're not meeting my needs or whatever, when actually it's like, actually I need to do that for myself. And that's what I've noticed my pattern has been, over-relying, outsourcing, when I actually can source that for myself, and has led to a lot of codependency in relationships, which really isn't healthy, you know. And this, yeah, it can, like, and depending on also how many commitments your friends have on a day-to-day basis, like if somebody has 5 kids or 2 kids, or needs a lot of space to themselves, they're not always going to be able to get back to us when we think we need them to. You know, people have their own devotional practices or families to tend to every day. You know, so it's like, a lot of the time when people haven't got back to us and things like that, it's not personal. They're loving themselves and their own day-to-day prayer. And we have to have ownership over where we are not meeting our own needs, because I think if I was ever now to point the finger again that you're not meeting my needs, it's because I'm not actually meeting my own needs, So anyways, I could go on and on about that. I feel, as I said, that is a whole episode in itself about self-sourcing and sometimes projecting unrealistic expectations onto other people. But trusting that needed to be shared there. And just another thing to share. So I pulled a card this morning from Rebecca Campbell's The Starseed Oracle. And I just wanted to share it here. It's called The Great Severing. Mars energy, anger, conflict, softening to love. And this is a card that always comes up for me when I'm having difficulties in relationships. And it's that reminder to soften to love. So I'm just going to read out some of it here. Let me just get my candle so I can see it. Okay. The warring planet of Mars is our constant reminder that it's important to soften, forgive, and find our way back to love. There are many things in the human experience that make it difficult for our heart and soul to stay open to the never-ending source of love. We are all wounded, and our unconscious wounds inflict wounds on others. It can feel like a never-ending dance we can never escape. If we aren't careful, before long, we'll see the world as a scary, dangerous place where fear and anxiety roam free. When we're hurt, it's normal to close off our heart to the world, to let the painful experience confirm the agony of separation in earthly life. Soften and find your way back to love anyway. It's normal to want to hide away from others and the world when fear, anxiety and paranoia paralyze you. But come out of your cave and soften your heart anyway. And this is my favourite bit. We're all innocent children, spinning our way around the world. Find a way to see the innocence in all people, especially yourself. So yeah, I just wanted to finish on that because, when we're talking about truth, distorted truth, conflict in relationships, disharmony, boundaries been crossed. For me, the most important thing, which this card always reminds me, is to soften and forgive and find our way back to love. And to see the innocence in all people, especially ourselves. We're all innocent children, wounded. And as I was journaling today, my soul was like, you need to acknowledge the difficult scenarios, relationships, experiences in your relationships. But in time, you have to come back to love. You have to soften. You have to forgive because we're all wounded and we're doing our best to be in truth. Everybody is doing their best. And when we are in disharmony or not in a loving place towards anybody in our lives, it's causing disharmony within us. And this is why forgiveness is so important, because it dissolves disharmony. And, a lot of people talk about cutting cords and cutting cords with people. The only way I believe you can cut cords with someone is to bring the connection back to love. Now, that could be that person, you'll never see them again, but when you think of that person, you think of love. And I think I shared this in one of the last few episodes about karmic relationships was something a friend shared with me was, have a picture of your ex or your friend that you fell out with in your room and keep looking at that picture until you feel nothing but peace and love. And he gave me that advice back in 2020, and holy Yeshua, what an amazing piece of advice, because if we don't feel peace towards anybody in our lives, it's a leak in energy. The cord is still much there. So, coming back to love and forgiveness and softening our heart through conflict is what that card is about. Anger, so it's during conflict we can become really hard and close our hearts off, but that's actually when we need to soften to love. And this doesn't mean that we won't have boundaries with that person, but softening to love. So anyways, I'm very passionate about these topics, and I'm excited to share more, because there's just so much when it comes to relationships. And as I devote myself to more to love, to the way of love, to divine union, I realise that my relationships mirror where I'm at with love. So there'll be more musings from my heart on these topics. And yeah, I really hope that made sense, because it wasn't, as I said, it wasn't necessarily that easy to try and get across. But just to finish off, again, I suppose my main intention was to share my thoughts on sharing truth. We gotta make sure, is this really coming from a loving place? Is this in the highest good for all? Or is this me projecting my own shit and my own judgments onto somebody that I love? And as I said, for me, how I know that is taking some space, breathing, journaling, talking to my therapist about it, making sure that when I share my truth, it's actually coming from my heart and not my head and my wounded, patriarchal, masculine wounds within my mind. And that's where sometimes it will take some time to respond to people, because I have to make sure, no, this isn't coming from a wounded, shadowy place. This is actually coming from my own loving heart connection to source. So this is where this is a very devotional plat. It takes up so much time for me. Like, this is the work. Like, my partner was going to work and he was like, what are you going to do for that? I was like, I'm going to do the real work, which is the healing. Now, sometimes we need to do the practical stuff of earning money as well, and sometimes it's all the one, but for me, I've realised, it just dawned on me the past week that this is why I've given up everything, because to shed this amount of shite in my life, untruths, distortion, has taken me daily devotional practice of journaling, shedding, committing to more love, to shedding untruths. So this is your reminder that you're allowed to give up that which you need to give up to devote yourself to this path, and sometimes our work will help us to devote to that. I know when I work with clients one-to-one, it actually reminds me of what truth is, So yeah, just seeing if there's anything else there. Yeah, I suppose the last thing is that, like, I am really passionate about utilising conscious relationships to share truth. I had a beautiful experience with a sister last week where we were able to come together and really dissipate the energy in our connection. And, some things were difficult to hear, but, it was very empowering to receive someone's truth and to share, truth, and to hand back anything that we think isn't ours, and also to reflect where we might have done things differently. It's so important. And yeah, this is something I wanted to share. I felt sick before that call with that person, because it was, every time sharing my truth is so uncomfortable. It's scary. Like, it actually brings up that feeling when I was a child, and if I shared my truth, I'd get in trouble, or you got smacked, or whatever happened. Like, I was nearly physically vomiting. So I just wanted to reiterate how fucking difficult it can be not to brush things under the carpet and to share truth. It can be extremely uncomfortable. It can feel like you're going to die. It can make you vomit. And I cannot emphasize how difficult it can be, and honouring your journey to be able to do that. It's taken me years of devotional practice just to be able to share my truth. When I wrote that letter to that person, I was like, why has this taken me so long? Because it's actually that difficult for me to do. And remembering, like, women especially have been silenced for eons around sharing their truth and their voice. Mary Magdalene was completely right out of history, basically. Women were burned as being witches just for being in their medicine. The witch wound also is prevalent for men. Men were also killed for being in truth. So the witch wound, it's called, sharing our truth has got us persecuted and killed in many lifetimes. So this isn't for the faint-hearted. Sharing truth is a vulnerable, scary thing, but it's one of the most empowering, healing things we can do, to share our truth. And sometimes we'll get it wrong, and we'll be sharing our own distortions and projections and judgments, and that's okay too. We're only human. But the more time we spend with our soul and our heart and come into love, the more our love is, I believe, coming from a more divine place rather than a distorted place. So I could be here for another hour, but I need to go and get some food into me. So gratitude to all of you lovely men and women that are tuning in to Grá Mòr Léan. It's an honour to share this space with you. Again, there is an option to leave comments under the podcast on Spotify, and there is a link to donate any money, to donate something if you'd like to donate towards this podcast. Okay, much love to you all, and I'll be back again soon. Grá Mòr agus Banachtaí. Love and blessings.